Alright, I'm going to do something a little different, and I'm going to do the deck tech right before game 1. I think some of Nikachu's old videos used to be like that. Maybe his new ones are like that too. I haven't always kept up with all of his new content. I've watched a few of them, of course, though. Yeah. um, but yeah, so this is the 5-0 Merfolk deck that I posted on Twitter. Um, yeah, so basically how it went is I had that 5-0 result a while back. Then I had that disappointing 2-3 league. Then I had those other two leagues where I went 3-2. And you know, as you can see, the first change obviously was Fairy Conclave, putting that back in the deck. This card has been very, very good so far. I think that was one of the takeaways. Fairy Conclave is superior to Castle Vantress when the games are very mid-rangey. You know, um, Castle Vantress is actually generally superior when the format is both faster and more control heavy, because you know, not having as much chance of coming into play tapped is better against aggro matchups, but the scry ability is actually superior in control decks. Plus, the control decks typically play Field of Ruin, so having more copies also helps make sure that you can still use the ability even if they Field of Ruin you a few times. And of course, some of those will be directed in Mutavault, but still, if you only have a few, especially since they usually draw more cards, you can possibly be kept off of it. But that being said, since the format seems very mid-range like, um, you know, even these prowess decks, they can be fast, but they're just they just have a lot of mid-range style grinding potential too. Um, yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I remember at one time I became pretty convinced that Castle Vantress was overall superior, probably in most situations, but I'm definitely not feeling like that right now. And given that league, I thought it was worth trying out Fairy Conclave again. I just remember, you know, there was that difficulty with dealing with a Liliana, which Fairy Conclave would have helped. So I've been really liking Fairy Conclave. You know, maybe I was a little too quick to decide that Castle Vantress would be the new Fairy Conclave I'd play. Um, I think, like I've explained before, I like how it gives me a lot of options at any given time. That is really what I like about Merfolk. That's why I play Merfolk. You know, some people think Merfolk is a brain dead deck. They're wrong. You know, and it's okay. Very few people have actually played the deck. And if they have, a lot of people have probably played the versions that really didn't play counterspells, maybe just Force Negation, no other counterspells. Probably they haven't been playing versions with Smuggler's Copter. Probably they haven't been. I mean, you know, actually, Merfolk Trickster is a pretty standard card. Definitely, they haven't been. Most of them haven't been playing the Fairy Conclave version. At least the ones that are dabbling in Merfolk. You know, randomly. Um, but a lot of it is also like it's really also just that I don't think a lot of people know how to play Merfolk correctly. Like I commented in a previous league, this is really a deck that relies on tricks rather than brute physical strength. You know, sure, you've got a couple lords. Some of the previous versions played like 12 or even 16 lords, but that's really, you know, humans and spirits are just better at outlording you generally. I mean, sure, their lords are not as cheap, but they're just like Drogstall Captain is just so much better than our lords. You know, giving hexproof and you know, and the Master Phantom, I forget what it's called, the 2-mana lord, you know, it's a 1/3. Also, flying is they generally have evasion out the bat. But what spirits doesn't necessarily have, besides with the possible exception of well, actually, spirits is kind of a tricky deck too. Actually, I could definitely see myself also being interested in its style of play. But that's neither here nor there. Merfolk has its own advantages, particularly clean on blockability if they have an island, and and I think the ability to support Force Negation much better, or Chalice of the Void, depending on which direction you go. I yeah, I just really like Merfolk because it's actually I think it's a very, very difficult deck to play correctly, and I think the reason why it has a bad reputation is that people incorrectly assume that it's a brain dead aggro deck. They play it awfully. Um, I think a lot of times they're not aware that they're either playing it wrong or they're playing a build that just is not the best in the current modern environment. They might be playing an older, more brain dead aggro style type of deck. And you know, I'm not actually saying the current Simic decks are like that. I don't want anybody to take me the wrong way or out of context. Just because you're more aggro doesn't mean you're brain dead. Just the Merfolk decks in general, especially because of Merfolk Trickster in more recent times, and Brazen Borrower, if you're playing that. Um, or Smuggler's Copter, and even to a lesser extent Force of Negation. Force of Negation particularly actually is, I think, trickier than people give it credit for, because just because you have an option to counter a lot of different spells, and the more options you have, the more difficult it is to decide the correct choice. So yeah, I just really like Merfolk. This is more or less the same deck that I've played the previous league to this one, except except that I think at the end of the last league I explained that I'm swapping out the Horizon lands for the Castle and the Oboro. That turned out to be pretty good. I don't know that I think the Oboro came up once. I haven't recorded my commentary over all of the matches yet. This is the following week, but yeah, now the main thing is this: is that number one, a repeal is out in favor of Brazen Borrower. Repeal was good, but Brazen Borrower seems just very strong right now. The only reason Brazen Borrower is not at its best for a while is that Ice Fang Coatl just really lines up well with Brazen Borrower. Even when it doesn't have Death Touch, it's just a clean 2-for-1. Whereas Brazen Borrower isn't actually a 2-for-1 even at its best. But just being able to bounce anything is just very strong. I think there's a Tron matchup where we see that come in handy. Yeah, it's just very strong. It's also more aggro. It also helps crew Smuggler's Copter, whereas Repeal doesn't. Although Repeal in theory could draw into a Merfolk that can crew, but that's more steps. It's more mana. Chalice is in the sideboard though. That's probably the biggest thing, in favor of bringing in Force of Negation from the sideboard. And as we'll see in the first match, in the first game of the first match, just one of the main reasons I like Force of Negation is it does something I refer to as a declunkifying the deck, or it declunkifies the deck, because the deck really is quite clunky. I mean, and the interesting thing is that this deck actually doesn't play any 1-drops other than Aether Vial, so it could easily support Chalice of the Void even in the main deck. And I thought about that. Maybe I want to play Benthic Pyromancer instead of Smuggler's Copter, but I just really have been liking Smuggler's Copter, so I'm just running this deck. But Force of Negation, though, it helps make up to some extent for the fact that we don't really have any 1-drops, other than, Aether Vial and the pseudo 1-drop of Dismember. Yeah, it's, being a 0-drop means that it can really help. It can really help hold the ground while we are setting up, our clunkier 2-mana plays, as opposed to the much more efficient 1-mana plays that a lot of other decks make, particularly Prowess. And I realized that taking Chalice out of the main deck does hurt the Chalice matchup, but one of the things I actually realized is that, since I don't know for sure what matchup I'm going to face in Game 1, Chalice is just not as good. Chalice is one of these cards that you almost want to mulligan to it. Not really, but, it's one of these cards that when you know you need it, it's much better. Because I end up keeping a lot of hands that don't have Chalice in Game 1 against Prowess. And also sometimes they can deal with it, like Redback Prowess playing Kolaghan's Command. So yeah, my thought process was just, Chalice is probably a better sideboard card just because it's better when I know I need it. It's better when I can evaluate my hands better based on if it has Chalice, if it doesn't have Chalice. And Force of Negation it's the only other card when I looked at my sideboard. I've actually thought about playing Relic, but when I looked at my sideboard, Force of Negation was the only other card that I said to myself, this is a very uniquely powerful card that Merfolk is one of the few decks that uniquely can play it, at least one of the more aggro/mid-range type decks that can play it very efficiently and effectively. Delver, of course, could too, but Delver's not at its best right now. And also it's uniquely a card that helps Merfolk set up for the more mid-game type environment that it thrives in the best, because it's free. And I think, as we'll see, Force of Negation really plays that role well. I also like the way between Dismember and Force of Negation, you've got your creatures covered for the most part. You can't guarantee you're going to have Dismember, but you in theory are able to deal with creatures. But you're also able to deal with any non-creature spells they play. Of course, something like Primeval Titan is something that, neither Dismember nor Force of Negation really deals with, but, that's one of the few exceptions. So yeah, I like the deck. I will be going over the games, and hope you enjoy. Alright, I'm going to be going over my Merfolk 5-0 result. This is the most recent league that I've played with Merfolk, and it's the one that I posted my result on Twitter on. Yeah, so I'm actually going to utilize the, I think the next step or next turn feature. I'm not sure if the menu can be seen on the video, but yeah, thanks for those who have commented and let me know that that the play button is probably not the best way to review this. Yeah, so let's go over this, and also I will make it a point to go over sideboarding, which I don't think I did in the previous in a lot of the previous post match recorded matches. Yeah, so basically what happened is I record, as you probably saw, I recorded 2 other Merfolk leagues, and at that point I was just getting pretty exhausted commenting, but I still felt like I could do better with Merfolk, so I just wanted to see if, you know, maybe taking Chalice out might make a difference. And, you know, as we will see, Chalice, taking Chalice out, I don't know if that is directly the #1 reason why this league turned out to be a 5-0 league, but suffice it to say, you know, I believed in the deck, and I'm glad I played another league, you know, after that, and but you know, because I was pretty exhausted, and actually I think I did this the following morning too. It was early in the morning. I wasn't really feeling up to commentary actually. So yeah, actually, correction. It was more because it was pretty early, so I just wasn't really feeling up to the commentary. But let's get into it. So next step, my first time using this feature. Okay, so here's our hand that we had, and I think I kept this because you know, the Force of Negations, this is where Force of Negation really helps a lot. If this was Chalice, it'd be so much more clunky, but Force of Negation gives us something to do, potentially, while we're playing our clunkier 2-drops. So, yeah, it's I'm already kind of liking having Force of Negation again. Oh, let me keep going. Maybe I'll use the play function here. Okay, they took Force of Negation, or I actually pitched Force of Negation. Yeah. So what happened is they Inquisitioned. And I pitched Force of Negation to counter their Kozilek, their return Inquisition of Kozilek. And my reasoning was that realistically, in these type of discard matchups, I find that Force of Negation tends to be somewhat of a liability. There aren't a lot of targets. Liliana, if they're playing it, is probably the best target, but you won't always have that opportunity. My thinking was I really want to be able to Spreading Seas them. It's just Spreading Seas is one of the best cards in this in these Jund type matchups. So yeah, I was just defending the Spreading Seas. You know, maybe not necessarily the best, but you know, let's see. Okay, and obviously not much to do there. Okay. Yeah, and I do play Spreading Seas here. I think this actually turns out to be some type of rogue deck, and this actually turns into an interesting game. They play Stink Drinker Bandit, which is actually a surprisingly aggro card, and Prowl really reduces the cost. And here I'm glad that I held on to my Spreading Seas, because the Creeping Tar Pit is the really good target there. I hope to draw another island. I do, but I am, you know, I am facing the possibility of you know, taking lots of damage. But yeah, here I play out both of these cards. I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling okay here. I think though something happens. Oh yeah, it's the Rankle. So I end up taking a lot of damage here. But see, the plan is Rankle actually doesn't trigger unless it connects. I mean, unless it actually deals combat damage. So the plan here is to bounce the Thieves Guild and to play Brazen Borrower and attack, but of course they presented another flyer, so I just bounced Rankle. I do have Fairy Conclave, though, for blocking the Brazen Borrower, and I've got the Brazen Borrower to block the Rankle. So I'm at 1 life, but I kind of feel like I stabilized. Yeah, and this is, I think, kind of obvious. There, block with Conclave, block with the Mutavault. Oh, and the nice thing here is I can actually play Dismember because of their Urborg. That's something to always look out for. And I do think I avail myself of this opportunity. And I'm actually feeling like I've actually got a pretty decent chance to win here. Of course, that slows me down a bit. I think something happens here, though, which is kind of unfortunate. Can't remember if it was this game or next game. Oh yeah, I think it was this game, because I just I don't think I can deal with that creeping tar pit. That was heartbreaking. But all right, so on to the next game in this match. All right, so this is game 2, and I'm going to go over sideboarding, like I said. So I took out the Force of Negations, I think, because realistically, yeah, it's a discard deck. There aren't a lot of great targets. They don't necessarily play a lot of graveyard removal, and also Deprive isn't that good for the same reason Force of Negation isn't that good. Aether Gust, of course, doesn't have any targets. So, like, what to bring in? I didn't like Force of Negation, but I thought, it was worth taking out. I figured that Chalice of the Void is actually better than Force of Negation here. Even though Force of Negation turned out to be a relatively efficient use of my mana in the first game, overall, I think the fact that I've had to Force Negation a discard spell shows that it's not exactly the best at this matchup. And I think Chalice still does a lot of work turning off their Thieves Guild Enforcers, their Fatal Pushes, So onto the game. This I'm pretty sure this was a keep, because it's got removal, it's got creatures. Sand can definitely get there. Yeah, and this was a keep. Yeah, leading with Fairy Conclave makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure I like Shadow Spear. Yeah, I like to get Silvergull out of my hand. It's the most obvious card for them to take with a discard spell, and digging deeper in my deck is just so powerful. Oh yeah, and Bitter Blossom. So this game, I think, is mostly just me out aggroing the Bitter Blossom. It's yeah, they just take so much damage from their Bitter Blossom. I mean, I get rid of one of their tokens just because it just makes it harder for them to block later. But yeah, I can tap one of these tokens. They don't have good blocks. I tap the one that has Shadow Spear on it. They take lethal. Or yeah, well, but yeah, they take they had what they needed, but they end up losing to their own Bitter Blossom triggers. That's how it oftentimes goes in this matchup. All right, so on to the third game, the third match. All right, game 3 in the first match of my 5-0 Merfolk League. Yeah, so let's see what happened here. Same sideboarding as last time, Chalice of the Void. I think I keep this. It's just, again, it beats. It's got things to do. The Lords are pretty powerful in a deck playing blue. Yeah, and I like Chalice. I think, like I've said before, if I can draw only one Chalice, it's pretty good. And it's good enough that it draws out the Thoughtseize. I'm not so sure if Force Negation would have done that. They might have taken Smuggler's Copter. So as far as I'm concerned, Chalice already did its job. It took one for the team instead of Smuggler's Copter. And look at this here. We've got another one. And interesting, they balanced the Smuggler's Copter on the Chalice, even though they took Chalice. maybe because they really needed that Thieves Guild Enforcer. So they are doing a fairly good job at killing my creatures, even without 2 mana. And this Prowler makes me take a lot of damage. So just like that, I'm a bit worried that a repeat of the first game is going to happen. That being said, I do have this Dismember. I can block and I can use it. I don't have the Urborg to make it painless, but it's still, yeah. And they end up taking lethal. And you see, this was obviously a misplay. They cracked the polluted delta before I attacked. There really wasn't much reason to do that. I guess they wanted to auto yield. Definitely, a cautionary tale. I would have had to have held back, and who knows? With this Prowler, they are representing lethal if they can potentially deal with both my creatures. Not sure how they could necessarily do that, but I would have had to have held back both Mutavaults. And there, of course, the plan. The plan would have been, not sure if I had another land drop or not. But yeah, actually, if they drew another Dismember, depending on if I had access to this other land drop, yeah, they may have been able to win. I still think it was correct. I still think it would have been correct for me to attack with Smuggler's Copter, just to put them in danger of lethal the following turn, and to cycle through a useless card. I could have potentially drew something else that could have helped me. It might have been correct to hold it back. But of course, the problem with Smuggler's Copter is it's yeah. Yeah, so I don't know what else to say. Just definitely the opponent made that easy. Oh yeah, actually, I know why they cracked it. Silly me. They have a Bitter Blossom in play, so this would have been the exact same thing. They would have just died on their upkeep. In retrospect, probably was a mistake for them to play Bitter Blossom, actually, for that reason. But yeah, but it is what it is.